All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Shana Cavish. I am the Health Promotion Specialist here in the Office of Health Promotion, and thank you for joining us for Spring into Health. Just a couple quick housekeeping things. Feel free to leave your mics muted and your cameras off. We will have some interactive parts that you can use the chat, or we'll be directing you to some other ways. If you are here for the Kinesiology 2115 extra credit, you must stay on until the end, and then you'll be given a link to a Qualtrics survey that you'll need to fill out, which is how you'll get your extra credit. So you don't get your extra credit just for logging in, you have to complete that. So all of that information will be available at the end. And so for now, I will turn it over to Taylor to begin our presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing well today. And so for the first portion of our presentation today, we're going to talk a little bit about alcohol. And so we're first going to start with a Kahoot to kind of gauge your knowledge of what you already know. So go ahead and join the Kahoot at kahoot.it. Please remember when putting in your Kahoot name to choose something appropriate. We're going to go ahead and get started on our Kahoot now. So this is our Spring into Health bar exam. So question 1, which two drinks have the same percent of alcohol? Beer and wine, wine and Four Loko, shot and Four Loko, and margarita and wine. So how many standard drinks is a Long Island iced tea? 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5, or none of the above? So a Long Island iced tea does have 3 to 4 standard drinks. And then the word tea actually throws people off. There is actually no tea in a Long Island iced tea. It's pretty much just liquor. So which of these have about half an ounce of pure alcohol in them? A shot of liquor, a 12-ounce beer, a 5-ounce glass of wine, or all of the above? So all of the above, these are all considered one standard serving size. So how did a Long Island iced tea get its name? Because of its color, because of the taste, it contains iced tea, or it was created in Long Island? So it got its name because it looks like iced tea. So how many standard drinks is a margarita? 1, 1.5, 2, or 2.5? So a margarita is about 2 standard drinks. Okay, and our last question, which of these drinks has the most alcohol? 1.5 ounces of whiskey, 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 24 ounces of Four Loko? Okay, so it's a Four Loko. A Four Loko is actually about 5 standard drinks. So 10 out of 10, do not recommend drinking those. Okay. So in third place, we have Cassandra. In second place, we have Melissa. And in first place, we have M. Good job, M. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about serving sizes. So many people are surprised to learn what actually counts as one drink. The amount of liquid in your cup, can, or bottle does not necessarily match up to how many standard drinks of alcohol you're actually having. In the United States, one standard drink or one alcoholic drink equivalent contains roughly 14 grams of pure alcohol, which is found in 12 ounces of regular beer, which is usually about 5% alcohol, 5 ounces of wine, which is typically about 12% alcohol, and then 1.5 ounces of distilled spirit, which is about 40% of alcohol. So remember, your serving size does not equal the amount in your cup. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about binge drinking. Binge drinking is the consumption of an excessive amount of alcohol in a short period of time. So drinking affects the male body differently versus the female body. So the formula for binge drinking is different for males versus females. A good way to remember what counts as binge drinking is what we like to call the 5-4-2 rule. Is anybody familiar with the 5-4-2 rule? You can go ahead and send a thumbs up if you are. We have a few popping up. So obviously it's 5 standard drinks for men or 4 standard drinks for women within a 2-hour time period. So remember that Four Loko we talked about a few minutes ago, that's roughly about 5 standard drinks. So just drinking one of those in 2 hours is binge drinking for men and women. So now we're going to talk a little bit about your BAC. And since we've covered the definition of a standard drink, we're going to talk about how it affects and how a person can get drunk. So we can all agree that the more standard drinks a person consumes, the drunker they will get. Well, drunkenness is actually a reflection of a person's blood alcohol content, or BAC. BAC is the amount of alcohol in your bloodstream, and there are several different factors that can determine your BAC. And before we move on, do we all know what the legal driving limit is in all 50 states? I see a few thumbs up. So the legal driving limit in all 50 states is 0.08. So factors that influence your BAC are time spent drinking, the number of drinks you consume, your gender. So with gender, alcohol is highly water soluble. And because women generally have a lower water content in their bodies than men, they usually reach a higher BAC if they consume alcohol at a similar rate to their male counterparts. Even if they're the same age and weight, women also have a lower quantity of an enzyme in their stomach that breaks down alcohol versus men. Your age is a factor. As you age, the intoxicating effects of alcohol become increasingly pronounced. The faster you consume alcohol, the faster your BAC will rise. Your body type plays a role in your BAC. So the more you weigh, the more water you tend to have in your body, which has a diluting effect on the alcohol you consume. And so that's why larger people usually require more drinks to keep pace with their smaller companions. So let's talk a little bit about BAC levels by effects. So roughly when you're in that 0.00 to 0.03, you have no impairment. But when you get up to that 0.06 level, this is when light and moderate drinkers begin to feel mildly relaxed and maybe a little bit lightheaded. Your inhibitions are slightly loosened, and whatever mood you were in before you started drinking may be mildly intensified, and your behavior may become exaggerated, making you talk louder or faster or act bolder than usual. And you might also feel a mild sense of euphoria. When you're reaching over that 0.06, this is when your judgment, perception, and information processing become impaired. People are less able to make good judgments and are more likely to misperceive situations and to take unwise risks. Their driving abilities are definitely impaired. And because driving requires constant and complex judgment, perception, and information processing, a serious problem is that the drinker usually cannot detect this impairment, and you cannot judge when your judgment is impaired or perceive when your perception is impaired. When you hit that 0.08 phase, this is when you're legally intoxicated in all states in the US. So you believe you're functioning better than you actually are. And at this level, you might start to slur your speech. Your sense of balance is probably off, and your motor skills are starting to become impaired. Your ability to see and hear clearly is diminished. Your judgment is affected. So it's difficult for you to decide whether or not to continue drinking. And also, your ability to evaluate sexual situations is impaired at this point. Students may jokingly refer to the state of mind as beer goggles, but this BAC can have serious repercussions, and people are more likely to take risks that they would not take when they're sober and are unable to judge accurately their ability to drive. So when you're in that 0.10 to 0.20% or 0.20, so you're feeling euphoric, but your coordination is off, your motor skills are impaired, your emotions are exaggerated, and some people become loud, aggressive, or belligerent. Your euphoric feelings may give way to unpleasant feelings eventually, and you may have difficulty talking, walking, or even standing. And your judgment and perception is now severely impaired, and you may become more aggressive. And then there becomes an increased risk of accidentally injuring yourself or others. And at this point, you may experience a blackout, vomiting, and then you might feel confused or dazed or severely disoriented. You might need help standing up or walking. And if you hurt yourself at this point, you probably won't realize it because you won't feel the pain and you're unaware that you've injured yourself, and chances are you won't do anything about it. And then when you get into the over the 0.20 to the 0.30%, your mental, physical, and sensory functions are severely impaired and you're emotionally numb. So there's an increased risk of asphyxiation from choking on vomit and seriously injuring yourself by falling or having other accidents. When you're in that 0.3%, you're in a stupor, you have little comprehension of where you are, and you may suddenly pass out at this point, and it may be difficult to be awakened. And so when this happens, your blood alcohol level happens to be at the level of surgical anesthesia. So you may also stop breathing at this point. And then if you reach that 0.4, you're probably in a coma, and the nerve centers controlling your heartbeat and respirations are slowing down, and you have a really high possibility of death at this point. So here is a standard chart of how your BAC can peak depending on the number of drinks that you have. So it goes from 100 pounds to around 240 pounds. And so say you weigh about 150 pounds. And so if you have 3 drinks, you're almost at that 0.08. And then with that 4th drink, you're at that 0.1. And so here's a really good gauge kind of yourself of what your peak BAC could look like depending on how many drinks you typically have if you're going out or having a drink at home. So there is another way to track your BAC using BAC tracking tools. So there are a couple of options. You have free tools like alcohol.org and calculator.net/BAC-calculator. And so this is where you can put in your gender, your body weight in pounds, the type of alcohol you drink, and then you can put in first when you started drinking and your last drink, and it'll calculate how long it takes for your BAC to get back to 0 and what it is at its peak. And then you have options that you can pay to use. And so first there's the My Limit app, which you can download it on your phone, and it costs about $5.99. And so this tracks your alcohol use in real time, and it can find your alcohol level in seconds, and has a real-time countdown timers, and has a simple drink counter, and it can keep up with your history, and it's very simple to use. But if you want to go one step further, there are BAC tracking devices. Backtrack is one that's FDA approved for personal and professional use, and their breathalyzers range anywhere from about $40 to $130. And they have several options from keychain breathalyzers, portable breathalyzers. They have breathalyzers that work with your smartphone where you can download an app and it keeps track of things for you. And then it has like a standard handheld breathalyzer as well.
All right, hi everyone. My name is Brittany Clarkson. I'm also a health educator here with the Office of Health Promotion. So we're going to switch gears just a little bit. Taylor covered a lot of information about alcohol intake and how that affects your body. And now we're going to move into how that same alcohol use affects your sex life, basically. So whenever I give sexual health talks, I recognize and understand the awkwardness of it all, but don't worry, we'll get through it together. And if any of these sexual topics make you uncomfortable, please definitely take the time that you need, log off, and take care of yourself. So When it comes to alcohol use and sex, the two typically go hand in hand, right? So when you are out partying or celebrating, maybe with your significant other, or maybe you just find somebody attractive, um, a lot of times a connection is made. So it's kind of silly to say never mix alcohol with sex. But what we are going to talk about is how to do that safely. And we want to emphasize that if you are under the age of 21, it is not legal for you to have any blood alcohol concentration or any indication of alcohol use. So we just have to throw that out there. But we also know you all are going to make up your own decisions. So we want to give you the information to help you make the best choices possible. Right. So when you mix alcohol with sex, there can be some benefits, right? As long as it's done in moderation and in a safe way, right? So studies have shown that alcohol can increase your interest in sex, right? Taylor talked about alcohol giving you a mild euphoric feeling. It just makes you feel good and makes you a little bit more open to sexual activity. Alcohol can also increase your sexual desire and your arousal. And again, it's a lot about lowering your inhibitions and letting yourself be able to feel or experience feelings or thoughts that you may not when you're sober. And that can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. Those inhibitions are the kind of like the gatekeepers in your mind from keeping you from doing something that you wouldn't do when you're sober, right? So your inhibitions tell you maybe don't dance on that table, or maybe don't send that you up text at 1 o'clock in the morning. So your inhibitions are what keep you safe and keep you from embarrassing yourself. But when you mix alcohol, your inhibitions are one of the first things to go, right? We also know that alcohol can also act as a social lubricant, right? It makes you more social. It gives you more courage to go out and talk to people that you have maybe never met before. It makes you sometimes just a better conversationalist. And then there's that theory of beer goggles that Taylor talked about, and that's actually got some scientific evidence behind it. Alcohol has been found to make people and places seem more attractive. So there was an experiment done in fruit flies who were given small amounts of alcohol. And when these fruit flies were given this alcohol, they were less picky about their reproductive partners, right? So alcohol kind of takes away some of the barriers that you would put on yourself if you were sober about attractiveness. And it even makes you a little less picky about where and maybe when you would have sex. So, when you're sober, you might not have sex in a bar bathroom, but when you're drinking alcohol, it doesn't seem like a problem. But is it really better, right? If alcohol is, such a good starter for sexual relationships and sexual activities, why is it so bad? But remember, I said that that's all in moderation, right? And in the BAC chart that Taylor showed, we have that fun zone, the 0.00 to the 0.03. That's the zone that we're talking about staying in to see some of those benefits in your sex life when it comes to using alcohol. But too much alcohol consumption and too frequent alcohol consumption can actually tank or ruin your sex life. So first of all, alcohol is a depressant. And just like rubbing alcohol, drinking alcohol can decrease sensitivity and act as like a numbing agent, right? And so one of the most important things for a healthy sexual experience is blood flow. And blood flow is what makes your reproductive parts more sensitive to the touch. And that's really what you're looking for to kind of fulfill what your arousal. But when you're drinking large amounts of alcohol, that blood flow becomes a little bit more restricted and your sensitivity becomes decreased. So what you're feeling doesn't feel as good as if it did when you're sober. There's also the risk for delayed orgasms. And again, that's due to the decreased sensitivity. But on the other side, guys are more subjected to premature ejaculation. And that just comes with your body's an inability to control your muscle movements and your muscle control after you had been drinking heavily. So guys are less likely to be able to hold in their ejaculations because they don't have the muscle control due to drinking so much alcohol. Again, sex is less satisfying with increased alcohol uses, and there are long-term effects. So those first couple were just, short-term effects that once you sober up, they're resolved. But for long-term, heavy and high-risk drinking, your sex life can really, really take a hit, right? You can develop sexual dysfunction. You can develop impotence. Impotence meaning you're not able to get or maintain an erection. For women, prolonged alcohol use and heavy alcohol use can affect your vaginal lubrication. You'll produce less lubrication, which makes sex a lot less comfortable. And also there's fertility issues a long time down the road with increased alcohol use. And Taylor also mentioned that when you are using alcohol, you're able to hurt yourself and not really notice it or not really care that you've injured yourself. The same thing can happen in sex with the fact that alcohol use can decrease vaginal lubrication. It can actually increase friction during sex, which can cause tearing and injury, but you wouldn't know that you were hurt because the alcohol has kind of numbed you up and you can't feel it. And that can be a long-term sexual health issue if not treated. So combining alcohol, especially alcohol at high levels and high-risk drinking and sex can be very, very risky, right? So looking back at that binge drinking, that 5 or more for men and 4 or more for women in a 2-hour time span, binge drinking often results in high-risk sex. And so when I say high-risk sex, I mean sex with multiple partners, sex with multiple partners at once, sex with unknown partners, sex that doesn't use any type of protection. All of those things are high-risk sex. And with the lowering of inhibitions that comes with drinking alcohol, that's a real possibility, right? And so one of the high-risk things, again, is not using safer sex measures, such as condoms. If you think about somebody who is actively drunk and their motor skills are decreased, doing the simplest tasks like tying their shoes or even picking up their belongings are difficult. Now, if you apply that to more higher level thinking tasks like driving, they absolutely cannot do it. Same thing with condom use. There's a lot of people who completely sober have issues using a condom perfectly and correctly in sober situations. So when you add alcohol to that and a person is inebriated and intoxicated, chances are that the condom is either not being used or it's not being used properly, right? Also, it's risky to have multiple sex partners and random sex partners. So partners that you don't know their sexual history, you don't know their STI status, and then multiple partners. The more partners you have, the more you're exposing yourself to potential STIs or unintended pregnancies. It could also result in physical injuries just from having lack of coordination and doing something that you need a lot of coordination for, which is sex. That can result in physical injuries. And again, that STI and pregnancy risk is so much higher when you've been drinking, especially binge drinking. So I want to talk quickly about alcohol and consent, and I will use the chat box really quick if you have something to add, or if you have an opinion you'd like to share, please drop it in the chat. But the first question is, what are some physical cues that would tell you someone is too drunk to consent to sex? So what could a person physically do after drinking that says that they are too drunk to consent? Okay, slurring their words, lots of slurring words. Okay. Not walking straight, stumbling, absolutely. Going in and out of consciousness, that's a huge one. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, these are all good. Sweating, okay, lack of balance. Okay. Fatigued and struggling to keep their eyes open. Those are really good ones. Okay, so the next question I have, and you can keep putting them in the chat. Do you think a drunk person can give consent? No, lots of no. I don't think I see any yeses, just all no's. Okay. Okay, so it looks like we're all kind of on the same page. The next question, can a person give consent if they've been drinking, but they don't seem drunk? Okay, still no's, yes, let's see a yes, still no's. Okay, not a good idea, okay. Okay, and then last question, what if both or all parties have been drinking? Can there be consent in that situation? Okay, still lots of no's, okay. All right, and depends on the level of drinking, it would be chaotic. Okay. Okay. Awesome. So some of these questions we're going to answer, some I'm going to allow you to answer for yourself. But when we talk about consent, I want to be very, very clear what consent is. So April is National Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so consent is a very, very heavy topic on our campus right now. But some of the things that consent is, so consent is mutual, meaning that all parties, right? And we kind of have this mindset that sex is just person A and person B, right? But sex can involve multiple people. So all parties have to agree upon whatever is happening. So they have to be fully aware of everything that's going to happen. It's active and it can be withdrawn at any time. So it's retractable. So this is that kind of like where those sex contracts don't really work because you can always take your consent away, right? Consent is freely given, meaning it doesn't exist if there's coercion or blackmail or intimidation or threats or anything like that. And then it's informed. So consent does not exist if a person is impaired due to alcohol or drugs, being asleep or unconscious, mentally impaired, or if they are below the age of consent. So those are the things that consent is. Consent is not silence. Consent is not having consent in the past. Just because a person consented to sex before doesn't mean that they have, you have a like all access pass from now on. Consent is not is not forced expressed or forced implied. So if you force somebody to say yes or force somebody to like nod their head to the question, do you want to have sex? That's not consent. Consent is not when someone is impaired. So there's a bit of a difference between intoxication and incapacitation. And so that's why I asked the question, do you believe a person can consent if they had been drinking but are not drunk, right? So intoxication is, not having your normal mental or physical faculties due to alcohol or drug use. And like you all said, some of the things are slurred speech, stumbling, exaggerated emotions, or hand gestures. But when we talk about incapacitation, that's a little more serious. This is when a person is speaking incoherently, they can't walk without assistance, they're confused, they don't know where they are, or they're in and out of consciousness. So it's important to realize if a person is intoxicated, where they may still be able to talk to you and let you know what they're thinking or they're feeling, or if they're incapacitated, where they have no idea what's going on and you can't get any information out of them. Consent is also not automatic for relationships. It is not contractual. Getting a swipe right or a green light on social media is not consent. And a person being passed out or unconscious is also not consent. So when it comes to how you get consent, it's important to do three things. It's important to ask, it's important to watch for their response, and it's also important to listen for their response. So I think we get a lot of awkward feelings when it comes to consent because we don't want to be like asking everything all the time. Oh, can I kiss you? Oh, can I touch you? Oh, can I take that off? It just feels really awkward and not sexy, not romantic. But asking is absolutely necessary. And there are ways to jazz it up and make it sexy, but it has to exist. And then you want to watch for that person's response. Are they responding in an excited manner? Are they responding in a very like shy or nervous manner? Or do they seem just like really like reluctant or like defeated? So that plays a huge part in that, if that's actually consent. And then you want to listen to the words that they're actually saying, right? If you ask a person, you know, can I touch you here? And they're saying words like, you know, I don't know, or I guess, that's not consent, right? Then, you know, you need to back it up and try to figure out, is this person really comfortable? Do you need to take a couple of steps back? Okay, so ask, watch, listen. Okay. So in real life, consent can look like this. Can I kiss you? Do you want to have sex with me? How far do you want to go? Those are definitely great questions to ask before emotions get hot and heavy, so that you're thinking with a clear mind. And then continuing to do check-ins, things like, how does that feel? Does that feel good? Do you want to keep going? What would you like to do next? And then checking in, should I stop? Is this okay? So always being in communication and figuring out what your partner or your partners want, what's working for them, and also being honest about what's working for you, and not just saying yes to a sexual act because you think that's what they're expecting from you, or you're going to disappoint them. Yeah. So we're going to quickly turn it over to Officer Buttersworth and Detective Brown with UPD. Let's stop this.
Hi, I'm Detective Brown, and I think Officer Buttersworth is getting set up.
All right, yep, I'm here.
Okay.
All right, so hey, I'm Officer Butterworth. First off, we do want to say thank you for the opportunity to come talk to y'all today. I just want to touch on a few things real quick on the alcohol side of things. We all know that the age of alcohol, you got to be 21 years or older. And so I'm not going to sort of harp on that side of it. But the question is what happens if you're underage and you've been drinking alcohol? And especially like, let's put this at a party scene. So you're underage, you're drinking alcohol, and you recognize that your friend who's also been drinking alcohol, who's underage, they need help. They need somebody to come help them out. They're at that point where maybe they need medical help. Okay. So what do we do? What are some options that we can do? And I'm going to give you all the option, like, do we call the police? Do we call our parents? Do we call an RA? Do we call a friend? What do y'all think? So got one that says, yep, call the police. Okay. But here's the thing. A lot of people think, oh, I'm going to call the police. I'm probably going to get in trouble. Okay. I want to let y'all know that there's a law out there. It's called the Lifeline Law. So if you have somebody that's under the age, they need help, they're intoxicated, and you think that there might be alcohol poisoning, don't be afraid to call 911. Don't be afraid to call the police or EMS and get them help. Whenever the police department shows up, it's very important for you to just cooperate and remain on scene. If you don't do that, that's when you can get in trouble. But if you remain on scene, you cooperate, and you're the first person to call, you're actually exempt from prosecution by state law. The university also is going to assist you with that as well. We're not going to say, oh, well, you're violating university policy. No, we're here to assist you through that process because our goal is to make sure that everybody's safe. Okay, we understand that underage drinking happens, and it's our job to try to prevent that as much as possible. But I can probably ask a whole group of people that are under 21 and said, hey, how many people have consumed alcohol? And probably about 90% will say, yes, I've consumed alcohol. I've been there. I was a college kid. I enjoyed it too, okay? But you have to be safe, you have to be responsible, and you have to know your limitations, and you also have to know how to do everything safely, and knowing that you need to get help for people that need to be helped. One thing I also want to touch on, and Taylor was mentioning this a little bit with alcohol, is BAC and how it affects your body. I will tell you, on average, it takes about 0.015, your BAC will come out of your body about 0.015 per hour. Okay, so let's say you're at a 0.08. to put this in perspective, it takes about 5 to 6 hours for the alcohol to be completely out of your body. Okay, it's 0.015 an hour. Now that is an average, but if you're at a 0.08, because we think it's about 2 drinks to get to about a 0.08, or we talked about earlier, it could be maybe 1 drink if you're drinking a Four Loko. You've got to be careful, because if you're at that higher level, you got to think about how long is it going to take me to get to a safe level where I can drive or operate a motor vehicle. And just because 0.08 is what the legal limit is, you can still receive a DWI for being under 0.08. If you can't operate a motor vehicle safely, or if you don't have your mental or physical faculties, even if you're at a 0.04 or 0.05, then you can still receive a DWI. Okay, it's making sure that you're safe to operate that motor vehicle. One thing I also want to let you know is, because we usually eat food whenever we're drinking. When you eat food, it is actually going to slow the process of that BAC from rising. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to rise. Once that food digests, then your alcohol is going to rise. Meaning that if you're at a restaurant, you had a few drinks, you introduce food into the body, you may take a longer time for you to reach that higher level of BAC, but an hour or 2 hours from then, you could be at a higher BAC and not even realize it. And especially if you've continued drinking. And that's when we start seeing a bigger issue with people, that they start driving, they start realizing their lower inhibitions, and they've had too much to drink and not paying attention to it. So I just wanted to touch base on a few of those alcohol things and try to help y'all out with some of that. But I'm also going to turn this over to Detective Brown, and she's going to give you some information about the sexual assault side.
All right, I'm Detective Brown. Like you said, I do personal crimes investigation, so I handle the sexual assaults that come in. A lot of times when we are investigating sexual assaults, alcohol is a factor that is part of the investigation. That's not to dissuade somebody from reporting or to make it sound like a bad thing. That's just part of life, right? They just did a whole presentation about alcohol and sex. That's part of the world we live in. And I just want to stress that even if you were consuming alcohol and you've been the victim of a crime, not to let that keep you from reporting. That doesn't affect how we investigate, doesn't make us take you less serious. We're aware, we're all people, we all know how things work. Like you said, we all were in college at one point too. So don't let the fact that alcohol is a factor keep you from coming in to report. It's not something that necessarily is a hindrance to the investigation. It's just part of it. And I think it was touched on earlier by Brittany that a lot of times where there's alcohol involved in a sexual assault, and a lot of the ones, like I said, majority of the ones we get, that's a factor either from the survivor or the suspect, or from both, have been consuming alcohol. That just becomes part of the investigation, and that's just something we work with through it, and we use as a tool to investigate. And maybe that, sometimes we have to talk to other people who were with the parties at the time prior to kind of gather more information to see who was drinking what they were drinking, and things of that nature. But it's not something that's a deal breaker in an investigation. And that goes for any type of crime, not just sexual assault. The fact that alcohol plays into it, if somebody has become the victim of a crime, is not something that we look at and we discount the crime or anything of that nature. But I think it is very important for everybody to know that if you go out and you go to the bar or friend's house and you consume alcohol, and then you're put into a situation where sexual assault might occur, that risk is increased because the inhibitions are lower. Sometimes those consent questions, they don't get asked because people are reading other things, body language, and bad decisions are made. And it can be difficult for both parties because sometimes somebody took something as a yes that was not a yes, and the mental capacity is not there, because when you're intoxicated, you have impaired function. You aren't able to clearly communicate the things that you need to communicate, but that doesn't make it any less severe. Shouldn't keep anybody from ever reporting as far as if they've been a victim of sexual assault. Do you have anything, Officer Butterworth? that you've
No,
seen?
one thing I do want to let y'all know about though is that we do have several options for reporting. One, our officers are always going to be there, and it's our job and duty to believe the victim. We treat them as survivors of the situation, and we're going to believe you. And when we have that conversation, but if you don't feel comfortable talking to us, you can also talk to, say, what we call a CSA. It's a Campus Safety Authority, and they're there to also report that statistic and the information with the campus. Title IX is a resource. Okay, if you feel like you want to talk to the Office of Health Promotion, I'm sure they can also be a resource. If not, a medical professional such as the counseling center, the health center, or your local hospital or safe house is our local resource. So there's a lot of resources out there for anybody that has been a victim of a sexual assault, or just really any personal crime, or even just being a victim of a crime. So I want to say that we're there for y'all in anything. If y'all have any questions related to alcohol, that's really more of my forte, because I'm also an SFST, which is the alcohol testing stuff. I'm actually one of the instructors, so that's why I know a little bit more about how the alcohol affects the body and trying to teach our officers and how to look for impairment. But if y'all have any questions or any concerns, shoot them out real quick and we'll address them.
And I just want to add also, if anybody ever does something to you, hurts you in any shape, form, or fashion, and you feel like it's your fault because there was alcohol or some other type of drug involved, please don't feel that way. Nobody should ever take advantage of you or hurt you or touch you or do something to you just because you are unable to protect yourself or communicate. That you should feel no shame for that ever. And you should always report those so we can try to get you the help you need. But please don't let that stop you because you believe that you should have done better. Please don't. Nobody should ever take advantage of any situation, regardless of the circumstances.
Are there any questions out there? I don't know, Brittany, Taylor, is there anything else that we need to add, or?
I think that's great. If you guys want to just drop your emails in the chat, just so that if a student has a question they're not comfortable asking in the chat, they can shoot you an email. So you guys can look for that there. And then here is the link. We have a QR code, and I will also put the link in the chat to access the survey. If you're here for kinesiology 2115, you must complete the entire survey, including the content checks and your kinesiology section information in order to win your extra credit. You'll also have a chance to be entered to win a prize. So we will leave this up for a few minutes, but that is the end of the presentation. So thank you so much, CUPD, for your contributions to this presentation. They're putting their information in the chat. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to the Office of Health Promotion. So have a great rest of the day, everybody. Thank you.